Ubisoft and women don't have the best track record, with the former CEO claiming that females don't sell.
What are you showing me? His head. Come on! Open your eyes!
It took 7 years for Assassin's Creed to finally feature a female protagonist in the mainline series, outside of handheld exclusives and comic books. Assassin's Creed Unity had received major backlash the previous year for featuring only male characters for the co-op missions. For a game that was marketed about building your own unique assassin to play with friends, the character's gender was not one of those options. This started a suspicious trend in the way Ubisoft treat their female characters. Evie Frye was the first time a female protagonist was given the mainstream treatment, featuring in 2015's Assassin's Creed Syndicate, alongside her brother Jacob, who I covered in the previous video. For a game that sold as being a brother and sister as playable characters, the marketing did not reflect this, and Evie Frye was massively vacant from the promotional material for the game. And this treatment of female characters has unfortunately continued right up until today. In the next game, Origins, which featured by ex-wife Aya as a playable character for select sequences of the game, she was also entirely vacant from the marketing, and up until the game's release, I had no idea she was even playable. Next was Odyssey, which had the choice to play as the male character Alexios or the female Cassandra. However, only Alexios was featured on the box art of the game, and was featured much more heavily in the marketing, despite Cassandra being the canonical choice. However, at least Cassandra got an alternate cover for the box, which very little people will have known about. This finally brings us up to the latest entry, Valhalla, where the E3 trailer for the game once again neglected to show that you could switch genders, and left out the female version of Ivor from the marketing, despite it being canon this time that the Animus didn't even know the gender, so maybe as a selling point they could have incorporated that into the trailer by having the gender flip throughout. I feel that this context is incredibly necessary before we dive into the subject of today's video, because the stakes are quite high. Did Assassin's Creed deliver on the strong female protagonist that the games had lacked up until this point? As mentioned earlier, Assassin's Creed Syndicate features a pair of twins, Jacob and Evie Frye, as the playable protagonists, and in the last video I carried out an in-depth character study on Jacob, which acts as a part 1 of sorts to this. However, I will be retreading details from that video that convey a full picture of Evie, so that you won't be missing out if you start here, and I will be making references to my previous video. The goal of handling the twins separately is to give each of them the spotlight in a game that tried to juggle them both. Now, a few things to address from the previous video. As William Anderson gladly pointed out, I was pronouncing the Frye surname as Fryer, which I will be correcting for this video. Also, due to the demand, I will be covering the Jack the Ripper expansion as my next video, to provide a full, well-rounded look at the lives of the twins. However, at the time of recording, I haven't actually played that DLC yet, so this video will be focusing on the main game of Syndicate. Finally, you may have noticed I actually have a new microphone which I've bought in between uploads, which means that the consistency of this series is all up in the air now. And with that said, welcome back to my Assassin's Creed character study series, where we take a deeper look into the protagonists of Assassin's Creed. So far, we've taken a look at Ezio, Edward, Arno, Connor and Jacob, with detours analysing the expansion's Freedom Cry and the Tyranny of King Washington as well, so we're making very good progress. If you're new to the series, the card is on the screen now for you to take a look at the previous entries, and please consider liking and subscribing to stay up to date on the latest uploads. As per usual, we'll start by looking at the character and design, the story and setting, and finally conclude with an overview of my final thoughts. Today, we're looking at Evie Frye. Tactical and methodical, Evie followed the ways of the Creed by the book, wishing to live up to her father's standards. Was she a shadow of previous characters, or stands on her own as a well-defined character? Let's take a closer look. Born in 1847 alongside her brother Jacob, Evie was raised by her father as an assassin from the age of 6, after her grandmother passed away. Evie was extremely interested in the ways of the Creed, to the point where she would listen in on her father's conversations with fellow assassins, proving her training was paying off as she would successfully eavesdrop and then relay this information to her brother, although Jacob seemed much less interested. When her father died in 1868, the twins chose to take matters into their own hands, alongside fellow assassin George Westhouse, travelling to Croydon to try and make a difference by eliminating the Templars operating there. Evie is headstrong and methodical. She likes to keep to the shadows and follow a stealthier approach when taking out her targets, using precision to get the job done. She understands the lore of the Creed and the role she plays in this battle across history, and feels like she has to continue that legacy to make her father proud. She fills the big sister's shoes well and keeps her brother Jacob in check, correcting his mistakes and being the straight man to his jokes. In terms of design, let's look at Evie's signature and starting outfit. Unlike Jacob, who starts with a different outfit from his marketing counterpart, Evie has one suit that she wears throughout the entirety of the game. The outfit, like Jacob's, is inspired by the iconography of a crow, with an inverted hood and darker colour scheme to match. Evie's silhouette takes a lot from the previous protagonists, as she was no doubt inspired by the stories her father would tell her as a child, and therefore modelled her outfit accordingly. Most notable is the cape she wears on her right side, a fun inverse to the cape which Ezio wore in Assassin's Creed 2 and Brotherhood. She also sports thigh-high boots, similar to Ezio.
Sir! I'll take 2 of those to go.
An AC2 style popped collar, similar to Jacob's, to show off a shilling necklace, and a signature red belt that has the assassin insignia on the buckle, which harkens back to Ezio or Connor. However, Evie has several other items to make her outfit distinct, the obvious being her jacket, resembling a corset but made out of corduroy, with a leather yoke across the upper back and top of the shoulders. This also allows Evie to have a pattern on her outfit that makes it stand out more. It appears floral in places, which can usually symbolise peace, but being in black may be a twisted inversion on this. However, Evie is less confrontational than her brother, and so I could believe it's in her character to strive for peace. She also sports a square pattern on her collar, which uses a thick material which is also found on Jacob's outdoorsman coat, which harmonises both of their outfits together and gives them a broader appearance. It's nice to see that despite Ubisoft not promoting their female characters, they are also never sexualised. Evie has dressed appropriately in a way that still looks feminine. I think it's a bit lazy for Cassandra and Ivor to wear the same outfit as their male counterpart. It doesn't make them feel distinct, whereas Evie, from a first impression, feels like her own character. Evie's hair is done in crown braids. Yep, I totally knew that and didn't have to Google it. Held tightly and out of her face, which is a practical and stylish choice for the times. In contrast, her brother Jacob wore a hat no matter his costume, to keep his hair out of his face, and whilst slicked back in the game, the E3 trailer showed his hair to be in a parting that was messy and unkempt, hanging down even when his top hat was on. It shows that Evie takes more time to make sure she is the best prepared when on a mission, down to the smallest details. Where Jacob's outfit had earthy colours like greens and browns, Evie's colour scheme is restricted to simple black, white and red. These are used as warning signs in nature, high contrast combinations found in snakes, insects and birds. They have a particular effect on the human eye which makes you stand up and pay attention. For example, if red is placed on a white background, then it looks dull, but against a black background, it becomes the focus. This makes her outfit dramatic and striking, with the red standing out as a warning for onlookers, the opposite of Jacob's, which looked more open and inviting, because he was trying to attract others to join the Rooks. In keeping with tradition, Evie's visual presentation is more reminiscent of the classic assassin outfits, but with enough modern flair to feel dangerous and appealing to players, and appropriately dark to keep her concealed on the dark streets of London. Now moving on, as stated in my Jacob video, the weapons of Assassin's Creed Syndicate are few but expertly designed to fit the period. It should be noted, both Evie and Jacob have access to the same weapons, and so they aren't designed with a particular character in mind, which, from a gameplay perspective, can make the twins' combat feel very similar, but it does prove that both twins can adapt to any weapon. Because of modern sensibilities, the weapons all have to be concealable. Since you couldn't walk around the street with a million different weapons hanging out like you could in the Crusades, Evie has access to a cane with a hidden sword inside, a kukri, which is a form of short machete used in Nepal, or knuckle dusters, with a revolver pistol being available for ranged attacks. Each of these weapons has a very consistent colour scheme of black and gold, showing that whilst the assassin outfits may be personalised, the weapons are prestigious and kept in immaculate condition by the assassins, with gold and black being an expensive and rare colour scheme to show the assassins' hidden wealth and power, which the twins had access to from Henry Green, the leader of the London Brotherhood. Finally, we move on to the Assassin Gauntlet, a crazy multi-tool for the assassins, which combines several features into one steampunk-inspired design, including a poison dart, hidden blade, rope launcher and brass knuckles. This piece of kit is adapted from the standard hidden blade and has quite a history, first being used by an unnamed American assassin in 1852, before the design made its way to Victorian London, and was later modified by Alexander Graham Bell to incorporate the rope launcher and hallucinogenic darts, which then became the standard design right through until World War II. The rope launcher allows Evie to travel both vertically and horizontally across London with ease, and removes any need for parkour. However, this tool is purely used to speed up traversal, due to the wide roads of London disrupting the flow of gameplay on foot. On a narrative level, it shows Evie's problem solving to find a tool that can be appropriately used to travel quickly from streets to rooftops, when the buildings are too large to scale on foot. It adds to her obsessive need to have everything planned out ahead of time, and her fear of being ill-equipped to handle a situation. Overall, going into the game, Evie is definitely off to a strong start. Her visual language matches her personality well, and we'll see how she grows across the course of the story, as she learns to step out from the shadow of her father's expectations, and become her own individual, and being thrown in situations outside her comfort zone and try new and impulsive tactics to win back London. Speaking of which... Henry Green writes to the assassins to seek aid in London, as the Templars have overrun and taken over the city, manipulating the people and ruling them under an iron fist. However, it's in Croydon that our story begins, and we are introduced to the twins Jacob and Evie Frye, having left their hometown of Crawley to put an end to the Templar scheme on the outskirts of London.
Think you both can handle it?
What a question.
All right. My mistake. Ladies and gentlemen, the unstoppable Frye twins. See them nightly at Covent Garden.
George, honestly, I've studied the plans of the laboratory and have every route covered.
And I've got all I need right here. I'll extend your regards to Ferris.
Chat later, George. We've a train to catch.
As I did with Jacob, I find myself confused by the tone conveyed by Evie, as she seems to be taking the situation lightly, as if it's a simple run around in the park. She tries to assure George that the twins are more than capable of carrying out their tasks without much hand-holding, which is to be expected from her, since I can imagine in her years of training she has become very confident in herself and trusting of both her and her brother Jacob to carry out a task we don't yet know of. I do think Evie saying, "Have fun,
Don't die,"
is a bit too trusting of her character, and it's not yet established what the dynamic between her and Jacob is, as she may just be very trusting of him. She can't see that he is more immature than herself, maybe showing that she is more focused on perfecting herself and trusts that Jacob will be alright, because she can always help him out of any bad situation. We catch up with Evie as she plans to intercept a piece of Eden the Templars have had hold of. Fitting with her character, she surveys a map before she begins, highlighting her need to be prepared for any situation, including the entry and exit points should things go wrong. She also burns the map she was using, showing her to be very effective and efficient before a mission. As she creates a diversion by decoupling the train, she remains out of sight and follows the tenets of the creed. This whole section does a great job of showing Evie's competence, which is important to distinguish against her brother. Here we're introduced to both the targets, Sir David Brewster and his mistress Lucy Thorne, who will act as the main antagonist in Evie's story, so establishing her as the one in charge early on will do well to create a dynamic between the two of them going forward. Lucy Thorne uses her position of power to threaten and push Brewster to deliver results from the Apple of Eden in only a few days, as opposed to the 2 weeks it should naturally take. This gives purpose to Brewster's actions, since he now has to rush to meet a deadline. Brewster makes all the mistakes himself when trying to use the Apple of Eden as a power source, and Evie ends up saving the situation by assassinating her target before he can do more damage.
Piece of Eden.
Increase the electricity.
But it'll become unstable, sir.
You heard what Miss Thorne said. We need results now.
In his confession, Brewster spouts a bit of exposition about how Starrick has already found a replacement piece of Eden. However, at first, Evie sympathises with him and promises to continue his experiments safely so his legacy can carry on. In response, he says, "We fight to gain what we cannot take with us. It's in our nature." I like this line because it sums up and concludes his character in one fell swoop. He knows what he's doing will never be something he can reap the benefits of, and as a scientist, you have to be selfless enough to know that you are making progress for the good of other people and not yourself. In this regard, Brewster isn't afraid of death, because he knows that he did his part. This seems to set up something for Evie, where despite all her planning and preparation, she might be doing all this work for a future she'll never see, or in Brewster's case, make an impact on, since the Templars had already moved their sights to another piece of Eden. Much like how Evie's work in Croydon isn't making a dent, because the Templars have already moved to London. It's a great parallel. When she reunites with Jacob, she gets frustrated at the fact he doesn't take the piece of Eden seriously, and disregards their importance in the series, which players will know is not a smart way of thinking, and side with Evie. However, they both share the ambition to go to London, and Evie, hearing from Brewster that there is a second piece of Eden, is naturally worried of what that could have in store for the future. Jacob, however, convinces her not to be patient, but to act impulsively for once in her life, and take a train to London, with no plan, but absolutely a mission to be completed, ending the prologue.
Forget Crawley.
Father would have wanted us to
Oh,
listen.
Father. You could continue his legacy in London.
Freeing future generations from a city ruled by Templars. You know, Jacob Frye, you might just be right.
Then shall we?
Yes. Let's. Onward to London.
Now, surprisingly, on Evie's side, the prologue is excellent at conveying her character traits clearly to the player, and also establishing how she sympathises with those she has to kill. But in the case of the lab exploding, she can act on impulse when certain situations occur on the fly. However, there are also flaws there, as she is restricted by her father's expectations, and doesn't want to let him down, which can cause her to miss out on important decisions. Including a piece of Eden so early on, demonstrating its power, creates stakes for Evie's side of the story, as we know what is at risk if someone were to possess one in such a dense location as London. Upon arriving in London, the pair are quickly acquainted with Henry Green, the only assassin remaining. Henry makes a good first impression by showing that he has done his research on the pair and was anticipating their arrival, while showing he's sorry to hear about their father's passing, which is something Evie seems to greatly appreciate.
I was sorry to learn about your father's passing.
Thank you.
Which means not many people might have shown her father that much admiration, explaining why she idolised him. Now, don't worry, I will not make you suffer through this cutscene a second time.
I can see it now. We'll call ourselves the Rook.
Please, no.
When Jacob brings up the prospect of starting a gang, Evie is more focused on the mission, to find the Piece of Eden and not to stick around in London. Henry comments on how Evie's passion is inspiring.
Oh my god, this man has no reason!
Something I want to mention now is that since you play as both Frye twins in the game, the early section has their development quite stunted, and it's very plot focused to set up the side quests of the game. But also, it doesn't allow each twin to breathe on their own. You might prefer the sections where the twins are together over their separate storylines. However, personally, I find that the real meat of their development occurs when they are being the sole focus of the writing. And also, you play as Jacob for a vast majority of the sequence in Whitechapel, so Evie acts as a supporting cast member until the first gang leader is disposed of. When this happens, we see Evie start to warm to the idea of Jacob's gang, and celebrate with him when the Blighters rally to their side, showing her to loosen up a bit and enjoy Jacob's impulsive decisions on occasion. The next sequence starts with Evie once again very focused on retrieving the Piece of Eden, which they are no closer to locating. Further annoyed by Jacob being a brat and not helping her unless he gets the grapple gun he retrieved from the leader of Whitechapel fixed, which leads to it being implemented as the rope launcher into the assassin gauntlet. However, Jacob is then in a hurry to leave, but Evie is more patient and appreciative of others, so she offers to help Alexander Graham Bell with one of his projects as a thank you, also showing interest in the modern developments he was trying to implement. This shows her great foresight, as Evie helping Alexander proves to be a bigger benefit, as he can now intercept transmissions, which will get the Frye twins more information on the Templars, and also new recipes for their arsenal, including smoke bombs and hallucinogenic darts, proving Evie has the patience to see the benefits that others can bring, and how working with people can help in the long term. At last, Evie begins her quest for the Piece of Eden, although it should be noted you play as Jacob for at least the next hour of the game, so it's been a while since Evie has been on screen, which Jacob even mocks her for.
Ah, another exciting night home for Evie Frye.
Nice one, Ubisoft. In his absence, Evie has found the Piece of Eden is being transported into London. However, when the twins intercept the cargo, they end up making a blunder of things and leaving the chest behind. Thankfully, the Piece of Eden is not here, and the Templars aren't as ahead on the game as they thought. What they do find, however, is a book that, when seen in Eagle Vision, leads to a set of directions that Henry and Evie head out to pursue. Henry is not a field agent, for some reason, and so is uncomfortable at first, but Evie quickly talks him into it, giving the two some time together. The directions lead to none other than as the pair find themselves at the home of Edward Kenway. And I mean fan service in the most literal sense, as the mission is to discover all of Edward's memorabilia, which is quite on the nose, so I'm glad they're at least aware of this, and does however do a nice job of incorporating Edward Kenway into the plot of the game, since it was he who found the Shroud of Eden, which acts as the MacGuffin in this game. It's a credit to how beloved Edward Kenway became if we're getting nostalgia for him only 2 years after his appearance. However, this mission doesn't add anything to Evie's character, aside from her development with Henry Green as the two become closer. It's done in a natural way where her outgoing personality intrigues Henry and helps bring him out of his shell. However, the two can both share quieter and more intimate moments as they discuss Henry's flower pressing hobby.
He's literally the opposite of the Wizard of Oz!
Us lead to the monument.
What a wonderful use of your time following me around asking obvious questions.
Well, since Henry isn't here, I thought you might enjoy the company.
I don't require any company, and Mr. Green is following up on some leads of his own.
Oh yes, Mr. Green. That's a fascinating idea. Oh please, Mr. Green, come and take a look at this book and stand oh so close to me, Mr. Green.
I do not. Well, perhaps you have nothing better to do, but I'm busy protecting the assassins.
Are you really? What was it Father used to say?
Don't allow personal feelings to compromise the mission.
Precisely. Anyway, I'm off. If I find any more wild geese for you to chase, I'll be in touch.
This conversation shows how Evie is starting to go against the words of her father, but not in a malicious way, but because she's starting to become an individual, outside of the strict teachings of Ethan Frye. The Kenway Mansion may have been fan service, but it served a secondary purpose of showing how Evie doesn't mind going off on a tangent and slowing down progress to spend time with Henry. Jacob rightly calls her out on this, that she shouldn't belittle him for having fun if she is distracted herself by her romantic pursuits. Because of this, Evie chooses to focus solely on the mission to get back on track, and locates a precursor necklace that will act as a key to open the vault, where Edward Kenway has hidden the shroud. However, she is interrupted by Lucy Thorne, now out for blood, after Evie killed Brewster. Unfortunately, Lucy simply comments on how the assassins are too afraid to wield the power the Isu left for them, which adds to her controlling personality, which conflicts with Evie's, who likes to see the good in people, and let them take centre stage. I also think it's very strange here that, despite Jacob being known as the brash and the one to run into action and create these dramatic set pieces, so far in the game, it's actually been he who's had the stealthy black box missions that this era of Assassin's Creed was known for, where you infiltrate a location and use the various opportunities around you to create a scenario where you can assassinate your target the most effectively. This seems to fit Evie's personality perfectly. However, she only gets one in the entire game, and in her first encounter with a Templar outside of Brewster, they instead get into fisticuffs. This fight results in Lucy getting flung out of a window and stealing the precursor necklace. Now giving the Templars the upper hand, it's also the first time that Evie has directly failed, despite being the most efficient in combat, especially against Lucy. The unfortunate thing here is that we don't actually see the fallout of this encounter, since Evie first has to correct a mistake that Jacob has made. And so we're missing the opportunity for Evie to reflect on her mistakes, as she quickly needs to get dragged along the plot to correct a mistake that Jacob made in the previous sequence. When Jacob killed Dr. John Elliotson, it left a hole in the market for medical supplies, which has led to a dangerous knockoff being produced, to try and make a quick buck, in the absence of proper medical care, and in Victorian England, disease was rampant. We see firsthand as urchins begin to get unwell from the dodgy treatments. This leads Evie to have to make amends and find the correct supplies for Florence Nightingale to start making a real difference as Elliotson's successor. However, this isn't the last time that Evie will need to pick up Jacob's pieces, while her mission to retrieve the Piece of Eden is completely halted. This time, Jacob has left the transport industry without any production, with both Attaway and Milner being killed. This has led smaller gangs to threaten and force others to create omnibuses. Evie must help gain the deed to Attaway Transport for a new, independent company made by the people for the people to take over as a good and honest transport company. I think it's time to talk about Henry, because unfortunately, he's not given much. His role in the story is as a love interest, but also as a character that has lived in London and can therefore spout out exposition or information to move the plot along quicker.
Henry, Mr. Green, here, this is it.
This matches a casket owned by the Queen, kept in the Tower of London.
It's a fortress. I don't suppose you have any friends there?
A guardsman? If you can find him once you're inside.
I'll talk to you again when I have the shroud. Thank you for your help.
Right, yes.
Go outside and go talk to some bitch.
What we've seen there is a prime example where Henry recognises the chest that a key can fit into.
This matches a casket owned by the Queen.
Okay. Also, keeping him out of field missions means that he doesn't come across as anything more, since he plays no active role in the story. I don't think we actually even see him with his hood up. I only found out he had a hood from the Underground novel, which admittedly I haven't read, but it has a hell of a job trying to make this guy interesting. Now hopping back to Evie, we seem to have an issue here where her storyline has concluded too early. When we look at what's happened so far in the story, we have Evie following clues to uncover the location of a Piece of Eden, and then getting distracted by Jacob's mishaps. At this point the Templars have the key, but the story has to stop in its tracks for Jacob's mess to be dealt with. This is effective at showing how Jacob's story unknowingly has halted progress for Evie. However, her story acts as a time filler as she goes on this long quest to find the location of the Piece of Eden, without any twists or turns, simply one clue leading to another. However, compared to Jacob, I am thankful that Evie at least has a direction with her narrative. However, it can come across a bit samey, and now over halfway through the game, this is a chance to start throwing a spanner in the works. Evie now has to stop Lucy Thorne before she finds the chest, leading to her first black box assassination mission. And wow! For a character sold as being the stealthy one, to give Jacob 2 black box missions before Evie even gets 1 seems to be a real missed opportunity for her character to shine in her area of expertise. Nonetheless, this does act as a sort of finale for her story, as now it all hinges on correcting her mistake and infiltrating the impenetrable Tower of London, to put her skills to the test, and to kill Lucy once and for all and secure the shroud. The unique kill here is really in character, as Evie pretends to get captured so she can get close to Lucy, something Lucy's ego wouldn't expect to be a trap.
As you wish. I shall find it without your help, and then I'll strangle you with it. Watch her closely. So, you have murdered me after all.
Wow.
In her confession scene, she repeats her point earlier that the assassins would be too afraid to use the Shroud of Eden, something Evie will have to consider. However, even going back to Altair in the first game, when he said,
"You held fire in your hand, old man. It should have been destroyed."
Just because you have access to power doesn't mean you have to use it, and it takes someone with a stronger will to instead prevent others from taking it, keeping things fair and with free will. This is ultimately Lucy's downfall. She was greedy for control over others, and wasn't sympathetic to anyone other than herself. It's also interesting to see in the next scene that Crawford Starrick was going to dissolve their partnership together anyway, as he didn't want her to have more power than him. Despite her funding him and getting him into a position of power, he was still going to betray her and remove all that power from her, whether Evie got there first or not. Now, I'm sure you're aware in writing classes that the power of 3 is a very effective writing technique to hammer home an idea to your audience. And you see, Evie has actually only cleaned up 2 of Jacob's mistakes, so guess what happens next? That's right, the next sequence gives us a 3rd mistake for Evie to fix, after Jacob causes a mess at the Bank of England. I think this technique of getting Evie to clean up after Jacob's mistakes has some issues. Firstly, on Jacob's end, we never see any repercussions of this, because the pair don't ever reconvene in between sequences, so Evie can tell him to pack it in. But it also means that we've now wasted 3 missions where Evie could have been growing as a character. Instead, she's cleaning up after Jacob, which makes him feel more like the main character, and a lazy way of killing time on Evie's side. Jacob never learns from these mistakes, and so we're missing the needed drama there between the two of them. Also, Evie is just further proving how much more capable than Jacob she is. I said in Jacob's video that his storyline felt a lot like side quests, but from this perspective, it's just a bunch of mistakes he can make so Evie has something to do. If you cut out these missions where she fixes things, that would be a few hours freed up for her to be explored further. As it stands, her main antagonist has been removed from the board, and her story seems to be wrapped up. Except once again, things have been extended by having the chest not be in the Tower of London and Henry's lead to be incorrect. Henry's lead has been made incorrect for no reason other than the story doesn't have to end too soon, and Jacob can still have his missions without making them the finale of the game. I think there's a fundamental problem with the pacing of Assassin's Creed Syndicate, as both storylines for Jacob and Evie flow at very different speeds, and they never seem to be in sync, which causes Evie's side to drag and Jacob's to be directionless. Also, the next time we play as Evie, Henry Green gets kidnapped and we have to rescue him. God, these writers must have looked up the definition of filler. I will give them credit that Henry Green was set up to not be very effective on his own, so it makes sense that he'd be the one to get kidnapped. Although why Evie left him out of her sight is another question entirely.
Get Miss Nightingale to look at that. I must find the vault before Starrick secures the shroud.
We'll talk to the Maharaja again.
I will talk to the Maharaja. You will get your head looked at.
I'm sorry my capture hasn't done your plans.
You'd be safer on the train.
Even if you find the vault, you can't just walk into Buckingham Palace alone.
I won't be alone. I'll see you back at the train, Mr. Green.
Interestingly, it seems Henry is untrusting of Jacob and may have muscled in to try and protect Evie with his saviour complex, although this has not been set up correctly. Also, Evie proving she is more than capable of finding Starrick is honestly fair enough. Evie has proven to be incredibly capable and efficient. It's her emotional weakness that has given her character fault, as she simply put too much faith in other people. She assumes everyone is at her level, but when she realises people can't match her pace, she has to slow down, and in the case of Henry, getting to realise his place and wait behind. Because Evie knows as much as Jacob makes mistakes, she should have trusted him more, and worked with him throughout the story, and both only made mistakes when they're apart. Meeting back at the train, a lot later, Evie and Jacob reunite. Their conflict seems to bubble to the surface as Jacob berates Evie for being so loyal to their father instead of moving on. Although never outwardly said, I think Syndicate follows a theme of grief, and how both twins deal with it differently. However, I just want to say that when I was researching this video, I didn't actually know that their father had died, just before the events of the game. They reference that he's dead, but they never say that he died, in the same year that this game takes place. So I think they could have made that a bit more clear. If the game started with maybe a funeral or something? I don't know, I'm not a writer. But especially in Jacob's case, I think it would have helped to explain their actions a lot better. And Jacob coming across as a comedian would have had a really dark undertone, and I just think that's a really important detail to know. When it comes to this theme of grief, we see that while Jacob tries to move on and find a parental figure elsewhere, Evie is unable to move past her father's death and idolises him. Her attachment with Henry Green never being something she can focus on, because she's so far in the past that she's scared to have a future. It's a wedge that drives itself between all three of our main players here, going into the final sequence. Evie knows that it isn't over until the piece of Eden is recovered, and also that despite her best efforts, she needs Jacob to do it. With that, the pair infiltrate a ball at Buckingham Palace to find the location of the vault. Whilst Jacob goes off on his own, beforehand, Evie must gather everything she needs GTA style, like a carriage to take them to the ball from the Maharaja, who gives us insight into Jacob and Evie's father.
Those of us with the largest hearts protect them the most. Your father, for instance. From what I understand, he was extraordinarily sad. Broken, even, after your mother's passing. That kind of pain can blind us, cause us to say outlandish things to protect the ones we love.
We understand here that it seems to follow a pattern. Evie Frye was incredibly depressed after his wife died, and this led him to push Evie to be the best in her honour, whilst this scared Jacob and drove him away. Now that Ethan has passed, Evie is looking to do the same to herself, as it seems this is how their family handles grief. For her to overcome this, she has to stop pushing herself so much, slow down and let others into her life. At the ball, Evie has to put herself at a disadvantage to infiltrate the party. This is a character that at first took extra precautions to make sure she was as well equipped as possible for a mission, but now is willing to put herself at a disadvantage for a better shot, putting her trust in Jacob if things turn sour. After stealing the plans and locating the vault, Evie is confronted by Crawford Starrick. Now you might be saying, who? And that's completely correct. As with Jacob's storyline, the main villain of the game barely makes an appearance, and this is the first time Evie has seen what he looks like, never mind met him. Actually, it's worse, because bloody Jacob doesn't even meet him. I won't go over this again, but Crawford Starrick is such a non-entity in this game that his presence is never felt. It's actually worse in this case because Evie had Lucy Thorne as her rival, and she's already dead, so if anyone it should be Jacob who gets to confront Starrick. However, this seems to lead to accidentally the best scene in the game.
Time is a wonderful thing, Miss Frye. It heals all wounds. We may make mistakes while dancing, but the mazurka ends, and then we begin again. Problem is, everyone forgets. They trip on the same mistakes over and over.
People can learn.
Can they? Isn't everyone around you repeating the same steps? But if one man could remember the dance, could know the time, then he could change things for the better.
I have had enough.
This dance is nearly over. Soon, the people will forget the generation on this terrace. The ruin you nearly wrought on London. When the music ceases, Miss Frye, your time is up, and mine begins.
Wow. So there's quite a bit to unpack there. Starrick speaks of how the cycle of assassins and Templars is a dance that keeps beginning and ending over and over, without either side ever learning from their mistakes enough to outdo the other, and so the cycle continues. His plan to gain the Shroud of Eden is to have one person who can outlive the conflict every single time and create a winner. Of course, the winner being a tyrant, but still, isn't that what immortality would grant? The ability to surpass any conflict. But that's not all. This also works on another level that's personal to Evie, since Starrick doesn't believe that people can learn. That is what Evie has been trying to prove across her story, because the words written in a textbook can never be changed, and so sticking to the book all the time can never allow for change or growth. In a way, is this not a metaphor for the whole franchise? Here we have a character that is textbook, designed to evoke previous assassin outfits and has studied methodically the lore of Assassin's Creed to perfect themselves, and yet ultimately has repeated the same formula of the franchise instead of innovating and growing. You see where I'm going here? Crawford Starrick almost represents Ubisoft, being the villain, desperately looking for a way to break the cycle and keep the franchise fresh, considering the next game in this franchise was a vast departure that went back before the Assassins and Templars to tell a whole new angle of storytelling with an RPG focus. I don't think it's too much of a stretch to say that this was a Ubisoft insert telling the players that these games cannot continue going on forever in their current format because they have explored everything and milked it dry. Something has to change. And that's why Mirage is going back to the formula.
The key to the walls is one must lead with one's right foot.
Oh my! Everything all right, my dear?
Do you require assistance? I never liked balls.
Best line in the game. Starrick now has new motivation to grow his testicles back using the Shroud of... Sorry. When I was writing this part of the video, I decided to create a bit of a storyline where Mr. Starrick wants to use the Shroud of Eden to grow his testicles back after Evie kicked them. Please do excuse how informal these videos are starting to get. Whilst Jacob intercepts Starrick and is quickly taken out, Evie joins the fight, and together the two manage to defeat him alongside a helping hand from Henry Green.
Oh, my city!
Evie!
Who somehow does something useful, after being entirely useless. Wow! Finally able to prevent Starrick's testes from Evie and Jacob land the killing. Shouldn't have said blow. Not a good choice of words. Unfortunately, Starrick has nothing else to offer, and it's only after when the twins deliberate whether to wear the shroud that we see how far Evie has come.
Are you going to wear the shroud and run London?
Whatever it gives, it takes from someone else. You'd continue to age without me. You'd become like father.
A fate worse than death.
She idolised her father and wanted nothing more than for him to still be alive. By wearing the shroud, she could stop the unhealthy cycle her family has been put through, but she chooses to leave that power be, rejecting Lucy Thorne's way of thinking. By doing this, she's also admitting that she isn't the prime candidate for someone to be granted immortality. If one person should live forever, then it shouldn't be her. She's admitting that training and learning by the book doesn't make you any better than someone who does things differently, like her brother. She accepts his methods and her place, proving to be a noble character right through to the end. I think this is a tremendous place to leave her character, as she reunites with Henry Green and proves her influence on him has been a positive one, as he's managed to salvage the mission by helping her, making him finally gain the confidence to start acting in the field, once again demonstrating how Evie seeing the good in people works to her advantage. After receiving a knighthood from the Queen for their work, the twins head back to the train, in good spirits and ready for the next adventure, which I'm sure won't be traumatising. Say what you will about the execution, but it can't be denied that Assassin's Creed Syndicate is ambitious in its endeavours, packing in two main characters, each with their own respective storylines into a single title. I think out of the pair, Evie does come out on top. Her themes are present and consistent throughout, with adequate exploration to warrant her character having the spotlight. Unlike Jacob, her character is always consistent and well realised, and the design fits her character fantastically, as she offers a unique perspective on the Brotherhood that doesn't rely on her being a female, which avoids any bad stereotypes or tropes. She isn't the damsel in distress or fridged. I will still argue that the pacing of the game is its biggest sin, as I can think of at least 2 occasions where Evie was missing for hours of the game, not even as a playable character, but as a presence at all, and it all says to me that they didn't have enough for her to do. Her story is conveyed simply but effectively, and in the pantheon of Assassin's Creed characters, she stands out incredibly well for being simple but well executed and having emotional weaknesses that get explored throughout her time in London, as she has to deal with internal struggles she hadn't yet came to terms with. For a character that was defined as being the stealthy one, I think it's the biggest missed opportunity here. Whilst in the story, Evie proves to be very effective, she is only given one single black box assassination mission, and only 2 confession scenes to build up her character. This is a massive loss. Assassin's Creed, even Assassin's Creed Rogue, which is the shortest in the series, had at least 10 confession scenes with Shay, and I argue that these scenes are the most essential across the franchise, because they are the most character-based. They are a chance for ideologies to clash, for motivation to be conveyed, and for an insight into a different perspective to change how our protagonist acts. We saw it first with Arno, and now we see it here with Evie's story, just how much you're missing by not including these sections. She's only given Lucy Thorne as a target, and so her story is more self-contained, and wouldn't feel out of place as a DLC. Thankfully, this isn't the end of the Frye twins, and their development. And in the next video, I'll be diving into the DLC expansion for the game, set 20 years after the events of the main game and featuring an older Evie, returning to London after her brother's suspicious disappearance. I hope to see you next time, where we'll conclude our look at the Frye twins with Jack the Ripper.